Now, it's important that we talk about the issues of sociobiology and evolutionary psychology. In the last 30 or 40 years, there have been two of the major responses to the implications of neo-Darwinism on the way that we are, who we are, how we behave, our nature, all of those kind of issues. So in a way, this is about philosophy. It's about theories that suggest that you can explain pretty much everything, as Richard Dawkins likes to say, pretty much everything about us. So that's what we're going to talk about, which is going to be divided into two different sections. It's going to start off with the theory of sociobiology as it emerged in the 1970s, and it'll look at some of the resistances to that theory. And then it'll look at evolutionary psychology, which starts coming out in the 1980s and has probably become the dominant theory attempting to explain the relationship between where we are now in Darwinism and human nature. So let's start off with where it all started in terms of modern sociobiology in the work of Edward O. Wilson. Now, Darwin had always factored humans into his equation. But as we've seen, he was very coy about talking about it in Origin. And you'll remember the reasons for this, being that he didn't really want to cause a fuss. He held over the discussions of humans, but it didn't stop every man and their dog and their dog's dog and their dog's wife and whatever commenting about the implications of Darwin's theory of evolution through natural selection upon human development and human behaviour. But of course he didn't hold off. In the early 1870s he publishes The Descent of Man, which demonstrated that he had a biological explanation for many of our forms of behaviour as human beings, as animals. We've also seen theories like eugenics, which are basically biologically deterministic. In other words, your biological inheritance determines your behaviour, your illnesses, your weaknesses, your strengths, and provides an explanation for both human nature and human behaviour. But then there was this hiatus, a hiatus that resulted from the excesses of the Second World War, in particular the theories of the Nazis that had ended up in the final solution, the Shoah, the Holocaust, which send even the most hardline geneticists ploughing explanations of human behaviour that relied upon genetic models, sent them running to the hills, and for a period people went back to that older idea that comes from John Locke about culture, the blank slate, education, all of those things making us who we are, and downplaying the importance of our biological inheritance. But it couldn't last, and it didn't last, and by the 1970s we see the emergence of a new set of theories that were predicated upon ideas that had come out of population genetics during the 1950s and 1960s, but were most forcefully expressed by this urbane Harvard entomologist Edward O. Wilson, who publishes Sociobiology in 1975, I think it was. Sociobiology was published by Wilson, who was an expert in the social behaviour of insects. So let's bear this in mind. One of the things that he does is he looks at colonies of ants, explores their behaviour with each other, and relates that back to Darwin's model of evolution. What he wanted to do from his observations on insects was develop a universal theory of social behaviour that wouldn't just relate to colonies or kingdoms of ants or bees or whatever, but could be extended right the way through the animal kingdom into the human species itself. And he wrote the book Sociobiology, which explored it across the animal kingdom, and then at the end, in the final chapter, it goes bang, says, okay, we can use this model that explains why elephants are elephants and chimpanzees behave in the way that they do, and bee colonies are organised in the way that they're organised, and we can extend this into human behaviour, human culture, human society, using a model of evolution. And much to everybody's surprise, not least Wilson's own surprise, It was a runaway bestseller. People couldn't get enough of sociobiology because it seemed to answer some of the big questions about what it was to be a human being, what it was to have human nature, what it was that caused us to behave in the way that we behaved. We can see just how much it impacted upon US and European culture by looking at things like this, which is the front page in 1977 of Time magazine. Why do you do what you do? Sociobiology, a new theory of behaviour. So this is busted out of the academy. It's now headline news in American magazines. And here we have this idea, we can see them, puppets on a string. So we can see this theory as being deterministic. Our evolutionary inheritance is going to determine the way that we behave. So here we go back to Edward saying that sociobiology will be the systematic study of the biological basis of all social behaviour. Firstly, you had to establish the selection mechanism. Secondly, illustrate the process in a wide range of animal behaviours. And then thirdly, extend these explanations to the realm of human beings, human behaviour and human nature. So that is essentially what sociobiology was, and we'll return to it in a little while to look at people that criticised it and how the programme was developed.